Hey horror fans, Bored Now back with Rachel McDonald. On this video we return to the Final Destination franchise. So this is Final Destination 3 from 2006. So not a lot to talk about in the setup. It's the roller coaster one basically, but it's basically another standard Final Destination style plot. The twist this time is that it starts off at a fairground. And a bit like the character from the original movie, you have this character, Wendy, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's quite a familiar actress now to many people, but at the time she was really a newcomer. This one of her big early roles. Yeah. So she plays like the main final girl of the film. And just to show you how much of a 2006 movie this is, she has one of those, like, what now feel like ancient, like, digital style cameras. Yeah. And she actually uses that to film everyone on. Like, I'm pretty sure I've got one of them somewhere, like, dug away with, like, dust on it. It seemed that long ago, but, like, suddenly those cameras are, like, nothing compared to the technology. What do you think of Final Destination 3?
Okay, so I've only seen this film once before, and I watched it when I was first starting out watching horror, and I'd watched Final Destination and Final Destination 2, and I watched this one. And I remember not liking this one initially because I felt that it had no connection to the original film except for the premise. Because we talked about when we did Final Destination 2 that I really liked how they made it linked to the first one by showing that this was death's effect spreading out, and that every single person in Final Destination 2 was linked to someone from the first one. So the first time I watched it, I didn't like that. But now I remember thinking to myself, like yesterday I was talking to Steve and I was like, now that Final Destination has become kind of a franchise, and like back in the day I wasn't really familiar with horror movie franchises and how they can kind of just go on to be, you know, just standalone films and they don't always have to be connected. I kind of thought to myself, okay, so this time I'll just watch it as an entry in the franchise and I'll probably just enjoy it as just another entry in the Final Destination franchise. It doesn't necessarily have to be linked to the first movie. So with that in mind, I will say I did enjoy a lot of this film. It was fun, and some of the death scenes are really fun. And I will say the roller coaster scene, I think, is actually so far the scariest of the disaster scenes, for me at least. Like, I know everyone gets really freaked out by the freeway scene from the second one because it is the most realistic, but for me, I think because it's too realistic, it's like, oh, well, it's too close to home. Car crashes happen every day. It's not actually that scary. And the plane always scares me because I have a bit of a fear of flying, but I have never liked roller coasters. Ever. I'm not a roller coaster girl. So when we used to go to like theme parks and stuff when I was younger, I would always go on the safe rides. I would never go on roller coaster rides because they just scare the crap out of me. So what happened with this roller coaster is literally my worst fear about roller coasters coming to life in this movie. So I found that sequence terrifying. That being said, there were some things in this movie that did bug me, and we'll get into them as we go along. I do think that certain aspects have not aged well. Like, I have to remember this was made in the mid-2000s when things were done a little bit differently, but things like the upskirt photo that one of the guys takes, like, right at the beginning, and instead of, like, telling him off for taking an upskirt photo, they just talk about how, oh, we don't want to have this chick's butt on our camera roll. It's like, that's kind of not the point, but okay. And then there was that douchey character who kept following those girls around saying, show us your titties. And I was like, what is
with that? Yeah, he was really obnoxious, wasn't he?
He was really obnoxious. And I found that it started, I know. Steve and I were watching it and we're like, he better get a really nasty death. We want him to die in a really horrible way because he's a dickhead. And I just found that, like, I mean, not that there were that great of characters in the other two movies either, but at least in the first movie, I liked Alex. I loved Clea. In the second movie, I had Clea again, and I didn't mind the main chick. But in this movie, aside from the two main characters, and even they weren't that great, all of the characters were really disposable, stupid caricature characters, you know? Like the two girls that die in the tanning beds. Great scene, by the way. That is a fantastic scene, although I do have a small complaint. But they are such caricatures of like those, you know, those pop bubblegummy teeny bopper girls. I think by this point in the franchise, it starts to get a bit predictable and there aren't really that many surprises in store. You know, the first movie, you have the big mystery of what is happening. The second movie, we at least get that connection to the first movie, and we get a little bit of a mystery, and we get that whole, oh, we need to find this woman with the baby, and we have all of that. Whereas this movie just felt like a series of set pieces showing really inventive deaths with like a little bit in between. So there wasn't really any mystery or any intrigue. You basically knew what was going to happen by the end of the movie, seriously, which is fun. You know, like it's not trying to be, you know, in depth or whatever. So you can kind of watch it for a bit of lazy fun, but I do think that it is getting a bit thin, that the franchise is starting to maybe, I don't necessarily think that this was a concept that should have been turned into a franchise, so to speak, you know. At least in other franchises, you know, you have a killer, you know, you have Jason, or you have Michael, you have Ghostface coming back. Whereas this, because they're fighting death, it's like there's only so many things you can do with this concept.
Didn't enjoy it as much this time around. I think this was my second watch. But I think weirdly, because I'm not as invested in the franchise as you, like personally, this isn't one of my favourite franchises. Weirdly, because of that, I probably enjoyed it a bit more, and I just thought it was doing the thing again. And like you, I definitely enjoyed a lot of the death sequences. I think what they've maybe done over the course of the movie is just return to certain recurring themes, but just done their own version of it, because obviously once again the roller coaster in this is very like similar to like having a big pile up on the freeway, or it's another mode of transport in a way. So again, it's similar in a way to like the aeroplane from the first one. And you even get like stuff on the subway at the end. So there always seems to be links to like modes of transports and like certain trauma around them, and tend to turn it into a bit of a set piece. The characters are the weakest part of the movie. But the two leads I think are fine. I think they're solid enough. Not the best characters in the world, but I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead is always a very watchable actor, and she is quite good in it. Like the character, I think, is quite likeable overall, quite grounded. She has a decent arc, obviously not the biggest arc you're ever going to see, because it's not that sort of movie, but she does have a reasonable sort of like development over the film, and the way they have to work together, like I said, like they're these two characters who have never really gotten on. And they suddenly have to get along. The characters are basically like just throwaway, like you said, very obnoxious teen-style characters who are like really over the top. It's funny when you say we've sort of moved away from like those sorts of characters. I don't know if I agree with that or not. Like I just feel this is sometimes what horror movies, like a particular like genre of horror movies, still returns to, you know, because I think not wrong. In this case, I think they're just making most of the characters really annoying just as an excuse to like kill them off later on and have the spectacular death prove of in this sort of film. But unfortunately, it means you have to suffer through some quite annoying characters along the way. And there's certain bits that are like riffing off like the past movies, I feel, because the character played by Chris LeMench, the Ginger Snaps guy, he felt a little out of Ginger Snap, but he still playing the same age, funnily enough, in this, even though it's like 6 years later.
6 years later,
Well, it's good to see him. He's a pretty decent actor, but it's like he feels a little bit like the Carter of the film at times.
Yes, I think I said that.
Because he definitely has a Carter style moment. Before he dies, basically. So so there are definitely moments where they're doing like the versions of like past characters from other parts of the franchise. But I agree with you that it doesn't take itself too seriously. It is very tongue-in-cheek. Death scenes do deliver pretty much and decently. Like the characters are definitely overall the weakest part of the movie. They rinse and repeat and just it's only really, as I said, the camera rule, the picture rule, which they sort of added, but it just comes down to how good are the stunts and the death's going to be. That's what's going to define how good or bad the movie is. And luckily those moments do deliver. Me, there's not a lot between the opening 3 movies in the franchise, personally, and I expect that to maybe stay the same for the last 2 entries. So
yeah. I think as
Pretty
a franchise. Yeah, I think as a franchise, it doesn't work as well. But I have always loved the original movie just because I thought when it first, it was, first of all, it was one of the first horror movies I ever watched. So I definitely have a bit of an attachment to it because it was one of my introductions to horror. But I always loved the concept. I always thought the concept of death stalking you and death having a design was really interesting. And I think at the very least, the first movie and to some extent the second movie, they have a bit of fun playing with that concept. And I really enjoy that. Whereas with this one, like we've said, it's more of a deja vu, less taking itself seriously. So I think as we watch the next 2 movies, we'll probably stay in this kind of similar area of, you know, as long as it doesn't take itself too seriously and we get some good death scenes, there'll be enjoyable movies that you can just kind of throw on a Sunday afternoon. However, there was one thing in this movie that I just kind of went, you know, you can't do shit like this, okay? And it's when, and maybe I'm taking this too seriously, but it's when she's talking to, so the main character, Wendy, is talking to Kevin in the graveyard, and she pulls out a photo of Lincoln, and she's all like, this is a photo taken of Lincoln just before he died, and there's like a crack across his head, you know, showing where the bullet went. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But then the next photo she pulled out was off the Twin Towers. This is only 5 years after 9/11.
I didn't even notice that.
Oh my God. Yeah. So she pulls out a photo of the Twin Towers with like the shape of a plane on it and is like, look at this photo. And I'm like, no, you can't pull a real world tragic event like the Twin Towers and put it in a Final Destination movie. Like that is, to me, that was like crossing a line. And I went, that is, and the fact that it was only 5 years after 9/11. Like if it was like in a movie today,
yeah,
I'd still probably
pretty raw.
Exactly. And I'd still probably find it in poor taste, but to do it back then, yeah, as soon as Steven and I, because we were so shocked, we actually almost started laughing because we were like, what the hell? Who made this decision and who let them get so far that it ended up in the final cut? Like, how did no one look at this in the editing room and go, might be a little too far comparing a roller coaster crash in Final Destination to the Twin Towers? Like, yeah.
Context of the scene, so
yeah, she's trying to show that it was predicted before it happened, kind of thing. Omens that you see before they happen. I think it was supposed to link to the photo thing that they're doing, you know, because she's showing this is a photo of this, and it's linking to the photos they have. But
that's what I'm saying, because you mentioned Lincoln and it's a photo of like him.
Yeah.
I think that's the theme they're going for in the scene, isn't it? They're kind of saying Lincoln's as a historical death, and so
yes, and I get
it. I'm not saying it's not in poor taste, but
it was a little too much in poor taste for me to use the Twin Towers because the Twin Towers was such I mean, even today, it's still so raw what happened. And that sent shockwaves all around the world. It was such a mass scale murder that I just think using it in a horror film like Final Destination 3, for me, it was too poor taste. And I just went, no. Don't do that. And again, I might be taking it too seriously, but I just feel like a real world event that.
I think you're probably right.
Just
it's something I didn't really notice at the time, so I didn't really latch onto it. But sometimes, post 9/11, especially writers in novels and also film and on TV, I think sometimes they were a bit guilty of just sticking the events in as a backdrop.
Yeah.
Just to comment on it because you sort of felt, well, if I'm setting the story in New York and it's in the years after 9/11, how can I not sort of mention it or comment on it? But they're in this really odd, murky sort of place where unless your story has anything to do with it, it's probably maybe just best to kind of just do your story and leave that stuff out of it. But it's something that it was an issue that propped up particularly in the years following. Now we've obviously enough distance moved on, and some films stories do tackle it, and some are more successful than others, but it was this very murky area in the aftermath a few years after where storytellers weren't quite sure how to tackle it or if they should tackle it. An historical event, a bit like what happened with Lincoln. So we're probably like commenting on it and like kind of using it for what on the theme, but no. Yeah,
no, there were other examples they
probably a step too far.
I think it was. And like I just said, I said to Stephen, Lincoln obviously actually did happen, but that was over 100 years ago. Like, no one is still alive from that period. Devil that was out the front of the roller coaster ride and had all those sayings, that was Tony Todd.
Yeah, the voice I gathered. Yeah, it did sound like him.
So I thought that was a fun way to get him in the movie as a little shout out to the fact that he was in the previous two. So I thought that was cool. Like I said, I think the deaths in this were really fun. The tanning bed scene, which you had on your top 10 kills, is a particularly good scene because it's a classic Final Destination scene. You know, you see one effect and then the other effect and then the other effect and then the lead on and the lead on and the lead on. The girls don't need to be dying naked. We all knew I was going to complain about this because that is my little gripe. I know they're in a tanning salon. I know it makes contextual sense for them to be naked, but we don't need to see that. It's just, it didn't need to be filmed that way. And like I talked about in
I think one of them had the bottom on, didn't she?
Yes, they had the bottom on, but they don't usually show the bottom anyway. But again, it kind of comes back to what I was talking about in My Bloody Valentine, which is, I don't find horror movies misogynistic because they kill women, because obviously they're horror movies, but you have to look at the way in which they kill women. And if we're already inflicting brutal violence on female bodies, we don't need to fetishize it by having them be naked. So
such a cartoony style.
It was a cartoony thing, but it's still a bit male-gazy. So it was like, okay. But that being said, it is a fantastic sequence. And the way the tension builds in that scene is very reminiscent of, original Final Destination. It actually reminds me a bit of the teacher's death in the first movie. You can slowly see everything happening while the characters are completely oblivious. And then the fact I'd forgotten that they actually catch on fire. Like, I'd forgotten that the things actually. So, that was quite horrifying. Then the guy in the gym...
That's a good effect, isn't it?
That was a cool effect, yeah. But the guy in the gym, his death, even though you knew it was coming, still, when the weight comes down and just smashes his head like a watermelon, I was just like, oh my God, did that actually just happen? Yeah. So there were some really fun death scenes, I think, in this. And I think that's the thing, with the Final Destination becoming a franchise, that's what people come to this franchise for. People come to other franchises for the killers or the characters, but people come to Final Destination to see the creative ways that people are killed, and to see what the movies are going to produce in that respect. So I think as far as that goes, this movie definitely succeeded because it did have some really fun, entertaining deaths. And the subway scene at the end is really fun as well. We get another big set piece and another, big disaster.
Masculinity flying everywhere in that scene.
I know, right?
He was actually in one of the Wrong Turn sequels that we saw. He's got the glorious name of Texas Battle is his name, and I recognise the name on the credit. And if ever there was a mid-2000s style name for an actor, it's Texas Battle. There was just something about the way they seemed to name actors back then. But yeah, apparently he was in one of the Wrong Turn movies we did, Wrong Turn 2. Probably not surprised in many ways, but that was that was a fun scene as well. Just how over the top he was being and masculine, and then again a really cool effect with him being literally splattered. That was very satisfying. Yeah. I even quite enjoyed the stuff in the tool shop later on.
Yes, the hardware store. That was very tense.
I just like the way that plays out quite slowly and the different things. Because it is a gradual build, then going back and forth with these two characters.
Yes. And in a hardware store, I said to Stephen, I'm like, why couldn't they just work in a clothing store? They're in the most dangerous store ever.
So once again, they pick a good sort of setting for this kind of thing. So many dangerous things, and that was really good. And the way that stuff was quite suspenseful because I was assuming they both were going to die then, but it's actually only the girl. Yeah. And then it's later on that the other guy gets killed at the fireworks display. Another character I didn't mind too much was the sister of the main girl, Wendy. I thought they were... And she was quite well cast because she looked a lot like
Yes, they look like they could be sisters. And they had that nice little twist of, remember there were two people on the roller coaster, they couldn't figure out who they were. And then you get that little reveal that it was actually her sister, and that's revealed towards the end of the movie. So then that's another little twist that kind of keeps this movie a little bit fresh, you know, makes it feel a little bit fresher. And like they've still got some tricks up their sleeves.
You can predict things through the pictures and certain clues that are in the pictures. Now, did that bother you? Because it's something which seems to have been retconned in for this one. It's not something which has come up before.
No, because I didn't see it so much as a rule as just a happy coincidence that had happened in this movie. So in the previous two movies, they're always talking about looking out for signs. You know, you have to watch for signs. You have to. So in the previous two movies, we did have ways in which the deaths were predicted. So I kind of liked that this was a different twist on that, because I didn't think it was so much a new rule as it was just a new way for them to predict the deaths, which has always been present in this series. So no, that didn't bother me, and I actually thought it was an interesting twist on that little bit of mythology, like an interesting way to have them predict the deaths. Because again, as we talk about with these films, they can get repetitive. So you do need to come up with new ways to keep the audience interested and to keep the story going. So no, I actually quite liked that. What about you?
And actually, like, it's probably the sort of thing that should bother me. Like sometimes it does, because. But you've made a good point, actually. I didn't, because I was thinking it is a bit of a retcon, and like they've never really. But in a way, I can see your point. Then it is sort of a new version of some of the things we've seen in the past. The fireworks night and the way that whole scene
that was actually not a bad scene, and I thought there was some tension in that scene because they were desperately trying to get to the sister in that scene, you know, so we did actually have a bit of tension. I will admit the sister having the rope around her neck and being dragged by the horse, I found that actually quite hard to watch because it felt like a more realistic kind of recurrence, like that sort of thing can actually happen. People falling from horses and getting dragged by horses. So I found that scene a bit very intense, but I did like the scene where they stopped and the sister and Wendy was like, who was on the roller coaster with you? You have to tell me who was on the roller coaster because they're going to die next. And like 2 seconds later, her friends died. Like we don't even get any kind of breathing room before that death happened. So again, I thought that was very good at keeping momentum. I will admit this whole, like, I found the climax a little bit underwhelming simply because unlike the previous two films, these guys didn't have kind of like a get out of jail free card that they were looking for. Like in the first film, they're just trying to figure everything out. So everything's new to us. So when we get to the climax, it's exciting just because it's the first time we've reached this climax. In the second film, we have them trying to find the pregnant lady because they believe that if the pregnant lady gives birth to a baby that would have died in the crash, then that can save them. So we have that excitement of them running to the hospital. But this one, we didn't really have that. They didn't really figure out a way to really escape death other than if you intervene, then it skips you. So I felt like we didn't have like a climax that we were working towards, just taking itself less seriously and not really working with the patterns and things like that. Yeah.
The majority of the characters were just there for fodder. Were just there to be quite obnoxious and annoying, and for us to build to their death. At the end of 2, you had that really entertaining, like, sort of swerve, which was quite fun.
Yeah.
Even though I had mixed feelings on 2, I did enjoy the way it ended. And of this on the subway is, like, pretty decent as well.
Yeah.
It's not a bad sort of cliffhanger, and fits quite well, and just her reaction when the other guy gets on. Because at first I was wondering who these new people were.
Me too.
She was with,
like,
but
this is odd.
It's like, okay, these are random. But I think it's just a few months on, and she's obviously gone.
It's to show that she's just kind of moved on. Yeah, gone to college. Yeah, but I did like that old crap moment she had when she saw Kevin on the subway, and then they realized, shit, we're in trouble again. So it's a fun little cliffhanger ending, and I thought it worked well for this film. What this film was, So I think we've covered most of it. There's not really much to go deep with in this film.
Not much to talk about with this one. No, definitely not. Okay, so what would you rate Final Destination 3?
So, and again, this might be silly of me, but it's just how I felt about this particular bit. But I was going to give it a 6, but I have to knock a point off for that stupid Two Towers thing. I can't get over how bad, how in poor taste that was. So I'm going to go with 5, but would have been a 6 if it wasn't for that, because I think this was an entertaining Very fun kind of B-grade horror. Doesn't take itself too seriously. Doesn't have the best characters, but it's got some fun death scenes. Like I said, the roller coaster sequence scared the crap out of me, and I did enjoy it while I was watching it. You know, I wasn't watching it thinking, this is crap, this is terrible, I never want to watch this again. I was watching it thinking, this is fun, I could probably throw this on an afternoon and just chill and watch it. So 5 out of 10 for me. Lost a point for that stupid Two Towers reference.
I had a good time with this one personally. It's obviously not amazing or anything, but I'll go 6.5. I think
that's
pretty
fair.
Solid. We've got 2 more to do now before we get up to date with the franchise. We're still waiting on a
we're still waiting to see what's happening with that new one.
Yeah, God knows when that will come out. But I know we've got more 3D to enjoy in the 5th one, haven't we?
Yeah, we
3D,
do, don't we? Oh, fun.
Which I guess it's the sort of franchise, it was only a matter of time before they used that gimmick, probably.
Yeah.
But I hear nothing but bad things about Part 5, personally.
Yeah, me too.
Morgan returned for this one, Morgan and James Wong, who did the original movie.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Obviously,
that James Wong was
directed by someone else, but they returned for this. So
and you can see some similarities. Like, there were some sequences, especially like in the opening scene, like you mentioned, that when the Wendy character has similar instances to the Alex character in the first one. And I did see some similarities in filming between the first one and the third one. So you can tell that it was James Wong who was back in the director's seat, whereas the second one had a slightly different style.
Let us know your comments in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. You can share us out on social media. Look out for more horror reviews coming your way soon. We will, of course, get up to date on this franchise, do the next 2 installments, so we're ready for whenever the next movie comes out, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow my channel, Rachel McDonald, video essays covering TV shows and movies. I do have a few screen videos on there. If you're interested in a couple of horror-related videos, my Tumblr account is also linked through my YouTube, and I spend a lot of time over there. So Keith usually puts a link in the description so you can find me easily. So come and follow me everywhere.
Okay, thanks, guys. Take care and keep watching horror movies. We'll see you again soon. Bye.